3 sons took turns caring for their elderly father. The eldest brought meat, the second cooked soup, the third brought only a bowl of plain white rice. But when the family inheritance was finally divided, the entire village was left speechless. Everyone in the village said the eldest and second sons were the most filial. Their father was 76 years old. After suffering a bad fall, his legs became weak and he could barely move around. He stayed home most of the time, quietly recovering. The 3 brothers agreed to take turns caring for him, 1 month each. The eldest son lived in the city and ran a building materials business. He was by far the wealthiest of the 3. Whenever it was his turn, he would arrive with his car trunk packed full of pork, beef, lamb, roast duck, and braised chicken. Every day he served a different meat dish, filling the table with rich aromas that drifted halfway down the street. After setting the food down, he would proudly pat his chest and say, "Dad, eat as much as you want. We're not short on money. If you want something else, I'll bring it next time." Whenever villagers passed by, they all praised him. They said he had made something of himself, that he was generous to his father, and that he was the perfect example of a good son. But no one knew the truth. The old man had lost nearly all of his teeth, and his stomach was weak. No matter how delicious the meat smelled, he simply couldn't chew it, and even if he managed to swallow some, he couldn't digest it. The eldest son never once asked whether his father could actually eat the food. He would drop it off and then get busy with business calls or scrolling through videos on his phone. He couldn't even be bothered to pour his father a cup of hot water. Many nights, the old man sat in front of a table full of meat while still going hungry. His stomach would bloat and ache through the night, and he would lie there pressing his hand against his belly, unable to sleep. The second son owned a deli shop in the county town. He was clever, quick, and also financially comfortable. When it was his turn, he brought all kinds of expensive, nourishing soups: pork rib soup, chicken soup, soft-shell turtle soup, even sea cucumber soup. The moment he walked in, he would smile and say, "Dad, I simmered this for 4 or 5 hours. It's full of nutrition. 1 bowl of this and you'll feel strong again right away." The villagers praised him too. They said he was even more thoughtful than the eldest son because he understood that an old man couldn't eat hard food. They said his love was hidden in the details, but that too was only on the surface. For the sake of appearance and flavour, the second son's soups were loaded with oil and seasonings. Every time the old man drank them, he felt nauseous, dizzy, and sick to his stomach. And despite how rich they looked, there was barely anything solid inside. He might feel full for a short while, but not long after he would be starving again. The second son never stayed long. He would set the soup down, then rush back to his shop. He left his father alone in an empty house without even a few warm words. The old man often stared at his son's back as he walked away, and his heart felt cold and empty. Then there was the third son. He was just an ordinary farmer, living off a few acres of land. His wife was in poor health, his child was in middle school, and the entire family depended on whatever the fields could produce. Out of all 3 brothers, he was by far the poorest. So when it was his turn to care for their father, he couldn't afford meat. He couldn't afford expensive soup either. Every day, he brought his father a bowl of soft, freshly steamed white rice, sometimes with a small plate of homemade pickled radish or a little bit of tender tofu. Simple, plain, nothing fancy. But the third son was quiet and thoughtful. Before handing the bowl over, he would touch the side of it to make sure it was the right temperature. Then he would place it gently in his father's hands and softly say, "Dad, the rice is nice and soft today. Eat slowly. If it's not enough, I'll make more." He never just dropped off the food and left. He sat beside his father. He massaged his legs, he rubbed his back, he wiped his face, he helped him turn over in bed. He brought him water. He cleaned the room. He made sure his father stayed clean, comfortable, and cared for. He talked to him about the crops in the fields and how the grandson was doing in school. He simply stayed there, quietly keeping him company. The little room was filled not with luxury, but with warmth. But the villagers only saw what was on the outside. They saw the third son feeding his father plain white rice every day, and behind his back they called him cheap, stingy, and unfilial. Some even criticized him to his face. Your father raised you all these years and all you feed him is white rice. Couldn't you at least give him a proper dish?" The third son never argued. He never defended himself. He just kept bringing that warm bowl of rice every day and kept taking care of his father with all his heart. Then one night, everything changed. The old man suddenly suffered a stroke. Half his body went numb. His mouth twisted to one side, one eye drooped, and he could no longer speak. At that moment, it happened to be the eldest son's turn to care for him. When he saw his father in that condition, he didn't rush him to the hospital. Instead, he frowned and complained, "I feed you good food every day. How could this still happen? What terrible luck." He casually pulled a blanket over his father and muttered, "We'll deal with it in the morning." Then he turned around, went back to his room, and went to sleep, leaving his father to suffer alone through the night. By dawn, the old man's condition had become even worse. A neighbor discovered what had happened and quickly notified the second son. But when the second son arrived and saw his father, instead of showing concern, he blamed him too. "I bring you nourishing soup every single day. How did you still end up having a stroke? You must not have been taking care of yourself." He set down a bowl of soup, said the shop couldn't run without him, and left immediately, abandoning his seriously ill father at home. When the third son heard the news, he ran back from the fields like a madman. The moment he saw his father lying there in agony, tears streamed down his face. Without saying a word, he lifted his father onto his back and started running toward the town hospital. It was more than 10 miles of mountain road. He didn't stop once. By the time he arrived, he was drenched in sweat, his legs shaking from exhaustion, but he never put his father down. At the hospital, the doctor said if he had arrived even 30 minutes later, he wouldn't have survived. He needed to be admitted immediately. When the eldest and second sons got the call, both refused to come. The eldest son said he was too busy with business and only sent a token amount of money. The second son didn't even bother. He simply hung up the phone. The third son took out every last bit of savings his family had and paid the hospital bill. From that moment on, he never left his father's bedside for even a step. He brought him water. He fed him medicine. He wiped his body. He changed his clothes. He cleaned up after him when he used the bathroom. He stayed awake through the night and often didn't even have time to eat a proper meal himself. When the old man finally regained consciousness, he looked at the third son's bloodshot eyes and couldn't stop the tears from falling. After he was discharged from the hospital, the old man was left partially paralyzed. He could no longer take care of himself and needed someone with him at all times. The third son went to the eldest and second brothers and suggested they should once again take turns caring for their father closely. The eldest son refused immediately. "My business is too busy. I can't leave. If someone has to take care of him, you do it." The second son also pushed it away. "My deli shop has customers lined up every day. I don't have time to babysit a patient. You've got more free time anyway, so just work a little harder." The third son said nothing. He simply took on all the responsibility by himself. Every day he fed his father soft rice, one spoonful at a time. He massaged his paralyzed limbs. He helped him practice walking. He cared for him even better than before the illness. Afraid his father would feel lonely, he pushed him out in a wheelchair every day to get some sunlight and talk for a while. The villagers saw all of this with their own eyes, and slowly their view of the third son began to change. But the eldest and second sons still believed they had done nothing wrong. Whenever they spoke to others, they insisted, "We spent money on food. That already counts as being filial." Then one day, the old man's social security card and pension subsidy card were lost. Those cards held the retirement money he had saved all his life, and he needed to go to the township administrative office in person to replace them. The third son asked his two brothers if they could drive their father there. The eldest son snapped impatiently, "How do I have time for that? Just take him yourself on your bike." The second son brushed him off too. "I can't leave the shop. Handle it yourself and stop bothering me." With no other choice, the third son borrowed a 3-wheeled cart from a neighbor. He carefully lifted his father onto it, wrapped him in thick blankets and rode more than 20 miles through the cold wind to the government office. Along the way, he kept stopping to tuck the blankets around his father, terrified that he might get cold. By the time they got home, he had been back and forth for half the day and was so exhausted he could barely straighten his back. And through all of it, the eldest and second sons never once asked how their father was doing. As time passed, the old man's health kept declining. He knew he didn't have much time left. So one day, he called all 3 sons to his side and in front of the entire village announced that it was time to divide the family inheritance. Everyone assumed the eldest son, the one who always brought expensive meat, would get the most valuable pieces, the old family homestead and the savings. The second son would probably get the next best share. And the third son? Most people thought he'd be lucky to receive a few worn-out farming tools. The eldest son spoke first, full of confidence. "Dad, I brought you meat every day and spent the most money. The homestead and the city resettlement apartment should go to me." The second son refused to back down. "I made nourishing soup for you every single day. The savings and farm machinery should go to me." The third son stood quietly in the corner without saying a word. He had never cared about fighting over property. All he had ever wanted was for his father to live the rest of his life in peace. The old man looked at his 2 sons, their faces red as they argued, and then turned to the silent third son. Then, slowly, he announced a decision that shocked the entire village. His voice trembled as he said, "Eldest son, all those meat dishes you brought were only for show, to impress the villagers. You never cared whether I could chew them, whether I was comfortable, or whether I was truly being cared for. When I got sick, you ignored me. When I needed you, you were never there. You will not receive a single dollar or a single room from me." Then he turned to the second son. "Second son, you brought soup every day and knew how to say all the right words. But your soup never healed my body, and it certainly never warmed my heart. You never truly stayed with me, not even for a moment. Don't expect to take a single penny from this family either." Then the old man reached out, tightly held the third son's hand, and his voice choked with emotion. "Third son, the bowl of white rice you brought me was never stinginess. It was because you knew my teeth were weak and my stomach was fragile. Soft rice was what my body truly needed. When I had a stroke and was dying, you carried me to the hospital with your life on the line. You stayed by my side day and night. When I could no longer care for myself, you never left me, never complained, never thought I was dirty or troublesome. When I needed to replace my cards, you braved the freezing wind and took me there yourself. What you gave me was not delicacies or expensive food. What you gave me was your heart, your time, your presence, your real devotion as a son." In the end, the old man announced that the old family homestead, all the savings, the city resettlement apartment, and the family's fertile farmland would all go to the third son. The eldest and second sons would receive nothing. He only asked one thing of them: "Come back and visit your father more often." The eldest and second sons exploded on the spot. "This is unfair," they shouted. "Dad, you're being biased. How can one bowl of plain white rice be worth more than everything we did? Why should he get all the property?" The old man slammed his hand on the table and shouted back, "Because your third brother's smile came from his heart. The meat and soup you gave me were only performances. What he gave me was protection without hesitation, care without condition, and concern every single day. Real filial piety has never been about how much money you spend. It has always been about how much heart you put into it." The villagers standing around fell completely silent. Then, one by one, they began nodding in agreement. They all said the old man had divided things fairly, and that the third son deserved every bit of it. The eldest and second sons turned red with shame. They wanted to argue, but not a single word came out. In the end, they lowered their heads and walked away in humiliation. For half a year, they didn't dare come back. But after that, something changed. The eldest and second sons finally woke up. They stopped putting on shallow performances with meat and fancy soup. Whenever they had free time, they came home to spend time with their father and help the third son care for him. They spoke warm words. They did practical things. And for the first time, they began to understand what true love for a parent really meant. As for the third son, he still brought his father that same simple, warm bowl of white rice every day. and in the end, the family finally began to live in real harmony, with real love. Because true filial devotion is never a performance for other people. It is never about money, appearances, or expensive gifts. It is about genuine care, staying when someone needs you most, and giving your heart through real actions. To honor your parents with sincerity, that is what every son and daughter should truly do.